Hi guys, welcome to the next episode of The Guitar Show with my trusty butler Ramon here and our very special guest today, Marcus Cliffe. Marcus has been a friend of ours for quite some while. We've known him for a while. We've known him through his musical activities, also through his electronics activities, because he not only plays very fine guitar and very fine bass for a number of fairly notable acts that I'm sure he'll tell you about, but also he makes some very fine amplifiers, some of which we're playing through today and are conveniently obscured by our carcasses. But we'll probably reveal a bit of them later. But here we go. So welcome to this rather special edition of The Guitar Show. Ramon.
Right, okay then, Marcus.
Hit the man.
Amazing to meet you.
Ramon.
Can I say? Yeah, it's incredible. Yes. So how did you start playing guitar and what was your introduction into your amazing career?
Oh, well, my dad played the piano, my mum was a school teacher, so of course played the ubiquitous nylon strung guitar that was always lying around.
With an action 2 feet high?
Of course, yeah. So there was a piano around the house, there was a guitar around the house from as long as I can remember. And as a child I started tinkling on the piano. That was the first thing really, and then once I'd shown an interest, my parents sent me for private piano lessons. So my musical path started on the piano, which I sort of followed through my primary school years, and then the guitar being there naturally as well, I sort of picked that up and started listening. So like most people, just as a kid, and then listening to records, you then start to try and emulate that kind of stuff. So
and as we all know, right, viewers, in case you haven't missed this, the guitar, it's definitely the way to get the girls. Didn't work for me, but apparently that's how it goes when you're a teenager. Did it work for you?
Well, yes.
Oh, bitching!
It did. Yeah, so as I say, so piano was my main thing, and then a strange thing happened. I've just remembered this actually. At the age of 12, I got appendicitis one day, very badly, and was rushed into hospital to have my appendix whipped out. And as I'm old, back in those days, it wasn't keyhole surgery and a couple of days stay. I was in there for a good long time. And the guy in the bed next to me, who was a couple of years older than me, was a classical guitar player. And been stuck in beds for a week or so at a time. I got chatting to him and he played guitar, and I said, "Oh, I play guitar a bit." So we sort of struck up a friendship in the hospital. And
they used to be like hotels. Things are a bit different, I'm told.
And
political stuff there.
After we came out, because our parents had sort of met in visits, sat side by side, I used to go and see him, and he started giving me classical guitar lessons. He was the first person to teach me Angie by Davy Graham, which we were talking about earlier.
Dagger tuning or not?
No, I think that was in standard tuning.
Oh, that was, yeah.
It was,
right, yeah. It was.
So at that point, about 12, I sort of took up the guitar in a fairly serious way, because my friend Stephen was a classical guitar player, and so that's where I learned. The sort of the independent thumb thing and that, which has sort of stayed with me all my life.
Yeah. You're known as a great session guitarist in London. What was your inroad into that career?
I'm probably more known as a bass player. That was my first. Because I went to Leeds College of Music, so I got a place at Leeds College of Music to study jazz. At the time, I think it was the only place in the country you could do a degree course not in classical music.
Yeah.
So I went to Leeds. And Leeds, there's some great players come out of Leeds and still do. But I went as a piano player. I got in as a jazz piano player.
Right.
And I got into Leeds, and there were hundreds of great jazz piano players there, hundreds of them, and I thought, wow, these guys are so much, and when it came to putting down, you always have to have a second study, and I put down bass as my second study, not really realising that actually second study was going to be quite important. And I suddenly found myself, because there were no bass players in the college, stuck in these bands with guys who were all on their first instruments, and I was sort of,
A lot of sax players, a lot of guitar players, drummers.
And so I'm in a big band with 30 people and 2 music stands, 5 sheets of paper, and 1, 2, 3, you're off, and I was like, ooh. So I had to learn to play pretty quickly.
Right. Okay.
So that set me off on then having to be a bass player.
And you are, I guess, as you say, you are primarily probably known for being a bass player, and you've played bass and still play bass in some really, really, first call kind of outfits. So I mean, run us through a few of your gigs, past and
present.
Well, notwithstanding the fact that COVID's killed gigs stone dead, but apart from that.
Yeah. Well, currently, I mean, my main bass gig is with Manfred Mann, the Manfreds, who reformed in the 90s, and I've been a member of that band since over 20 years now.
Right,
so
okay.
they're still out there doing their gigs, things.
And they do well, don't they? I mean,
they
apart from now, they tour regularly.
Yeah, and they've kept things alive musically.
Yeah.
And then after, I suppose my longest association as a musician really has been with Mark Knopfler. I've worked with Mark since the 80s, so we've known each other 30 years.
Right. Okay.
Because I remember growing up, in the late 80s, early 90s, and hearing about that project called Notting Hillbillies.
The Notting Hillbillies. Yeah.
Tell me how did you first come to meet Mark Knopfler?
I had a band in the 80s, and we had some sort of mild success in Holland, of all places, and we were signed. We were the first act to be signed. Us and the Stone Roses were the first act to be signed to Silvertone Records, as it was then. So we did okay. In those days, having a record deal meant your rent was paid and studio bills were paid, and you were given. You weren't rich, but you had enough money to make your music. And around that time, so we're talking about mid 80s. When did Brothers in Arms come out? Early 80s.
Brothers in Arms was the famous album. It was like the
onset of CD.
It went CD, so it would have been actually probably 84ish.
Okay, so
maybe.
So Brothers in Arms had come out,
because Raikuda's album was the first album on CD apparently.
No way.
First digital as well.
Yeah.
Hugely digital.
It was
really.
Recorded first digital.
Bop Till You Drop.
Yeah, I think it was something like that.
I love that. That's still one of my favourite albums.
Yeah.
But so Dire Straits had made Brothers in Arms that had suddenly catapulted them into stratospheric album sales, and so I think that made Mark probably a very rich man at the time. I think he was in the Sunday Times Rich list or whatever. Yeah. And he kind of had become a bit of a recluse around that time. He wasn't doing anything musically.
Well, also he was already. I mean, he wasn't your classic sort of 18, 22-year-old starry-eyed
no, not
youngster.
At all. He was.
So he would have had a different approach to being hit by all that money and fame.
Yes, and I think. He wasn't doing much. He wasn't playing. He wasn't going out much, and he started coming out and playing with this band I was in, because the singer in the band, his best friend was a guy called Steve Phillips, who was a guitar repairer, guitar player, and a painter as well in Leeds, where Mark was a journalist for the Yorkshire Evening Post.
Did he play Dobro?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Steve hooked up with Mark back in the 70s, and I think he taught Mark to play guitar, all that old stuff that came from Steve.
Okay.
So there was a connection there, we knew each other. So Mark started coming out and playing guitar with our band. So that's how I got to know him really. He became our third guitar player.
Now tell me, this is quite weird, because Mark is already very successful.
He's incredibly successful.
And certainly, he may not be a household name in the supermarket, but he's known to any guitar player, in this country, let alone on the planet.
Yes.
And there you guys are, a working band, but not scaling the mega heights of success.
Not at all, no.
And Mark Knopfler kind of comes out with you. I mean, A, that must have helped and projected you, but B, that must have been, if you were playing, I don't know, pub or a venue, the buzz around it. It's like, Knopfler's in the pub with this band. Wasn't it that going on?
There was a bit of that, yeah. I think there's some YouTube footage of, we did, I think we played in a little, I think it was something like Pontefract Racecourse. We did because our band were quite well known in the north of England, so we'd always pull in a good crowd. Right. But I think it was a racecourse, and we were playing in a marquee, and I think the local TV got wind of it, and word spread, and I just remember seeing snakes of the crowds waiting because they knew Knopfler was going to play. So yeah, that did help. Yes.
Fantastic. And so where did things go from there then? So obviously then he asked you...
So Steve Phillips, the guitar maker, singer, artist, who taught Mark to play guitar in Leeds when he was a journalist there, started to make a solo album, and I think Steve at the time had just got divorced, and he was a bit short of money because I think he'd had to sell his house or whatever. And I think
Pay the bloody lawyers.
I think Mark said to Ed, his manager, he said, if I produce or play on Steve's solo album, would that help him, this album, be successful enough so that Steve can probably buy a house maybe?
Wow.
And Ed said, yeah, I'm sure. Because bear in mind, Mark hadn't done anything since Brothers in Arms. We're now well into the 80s. So what started off as Steve's solo album then turned into what became the Notting Hill Hillbillies, Missing, Presumed, Having a Good Time.
Because I always thought that it was kind of more or less like the Harrison, Dylan,
The Wilburys.
The Wilburys. I thought was it a nod to them? Do you think?
I'm not sure whether we were first.
Oh, maybe you were first. Yeah.
I think
You might have been right.
First. Yeah.
Yeah, but it started off with great intentions, you know.
Maybe George Harrison copied you guys.
Of course. but Mark's intention was to help his friend.
Right.
So it started off with good karma, didn't it? If you think about it.
I never would have known that. So it's fantastic that you've come and told us. That's
Yeah.
great how this band started.
So so I got asked to be part of that, and that was my first taste of having real success. I remember the very first press conference we did, and because before that I'd been in the band and we were doing okay. We did MTV interviews and telly and all things like that. But when the Notting Hill Hillbillies album came out, it went to #1 both sides of the Atlantic. And I say, first press conference, we sat in a room, probably twice as long as this, and we all sat at one end. And at the other end were journalists, photographers, so the ones at the back were on step ladders, down to guys crouched at the front. So there was like 5 or 6 tiers of photographers all across the room, and then they all said ready,
flash and all that.
and it all went. There was the almighty flash across the room. It took my breath away. This flash. So yeah, it was.
And suddenly you can't think of
it. You can't see it, or I can't do anything. So that was my first taste of having a #1 record. The first one.
Right.
How long did that project last for?
The initial tour we did, it probably lasted. Probably over a year. We did a big we did a big UK tour where we played everywhere. Small venues for Mark because he'd normally by Brothers in Arms had been playing big places, but we did for him small venues, which he enjoyed. He enjoyed playing some of these more clubby things.
Yeah.
And then we went straight to America, where we were #1 in America as well, and everything that entailed. Which I was in my 20s, I was young, and as I was telling you earlier, it's the first time I'd ever flown first class or been in a proper limousine, and it was great.
Wow.
And then on and off, we've done things on and off over the past since then. We did a run of gigs at Shepherd's Bush Empire about 10 years ago, and we also did 2 very memorable charity concerts. We went to Lockerbie straight after the Lockerbie flight crashed, and we were hosted by the local Women's Institute, the WI, who
my nan was part of them.
Really?
Yeah.
So we played at the Bingo Hall in Lockerbie.
Really?
Yeah. They made a stage at the one end, and we played there. And then a couple of years later, we did Dumble after the Dumble did the disaster. So they'll always stay with me.
Okay.
So then you joined Mark's solo project.
Yeah. Mark's been one of the few artists that's managed to keep a successful solo career going, and he still produces great material. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah.
People seem to have their periods where they're great and then they go off the boil a bit, but he's consistently put out really high quality music.
Most people run out of things to say. He hasn't.
Do you know what I think is his secret? I think he a lot of songwriters write from the first person, and they write from their own personal experiences. So and it's usually when things go bad in their lives, they've got emotional stuff to pour out. Mark's very good. Mark reads a lot, and I think he's very good at writing from a third person. Yeah. So he can.
And also, of course, his journalist background helps.
Probably, yeah.
Literal.
Yeah. Yes.
You've done a degree in literature.
I think so.
Were you involved in Local Hero?
Not originally, but I was in the studio with Mark last year working on the soundtrack for that.
Okay. Because of course our good friend Alan Darby,
Alan Darby
he was involved in the original project, wasn't he?
He certainly was, yes. Along with, I mean, a lot of musicians, if there are any musicians watching this, the people involved in Local Hero at the time, Michael Brecker, saxophone.
Wow, big deal.
Another guy I bumped into through Mark, who I was a big fan of back in the day, Mike Manieri, who was a vibes player from a very good fusion band in the 80s called Steps Ahead.
Oh yes.
So Mark knew, he was a musician's musician even back then.
And a good talent spotter.
You know, there's a, they played Live Aid, didn't they?
They did.
Who was the guy? Who was their guitar player in Dire Straits with a kind of? He just looked really kind of had these.
Was it Hal Linders?
Yeah, had these wacky clothes on.
Or was it David? Oh no, by then it was probably Hal Linders.
Yeah, he wore these kind of really bright coloured sort of overcoats, and
I think that would have been Hal. Because originally David was the
David Knopfler.
his brother was the second guitar player.
Yeah, you know, David, I'm good friends with him on Facebook, so he'll definitely see this.
Okay.
Hi, David.
You mean David Knopfler?
Yeah.
I've got at least, I think I've got 2 albums of his here.
Yeah, I know him really
in my
well.
vinyl behind us. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't want to start a war between David and
No,
me.
but listen, kind of things that you're up to today. Because I introduced you, not only as a musician, but also, as a studio producer, technician, amp builder. You're a bit of a Renaissance polymath, really. But I mean, tell us about some of that.
A Renaissance. That's funny you say that. Because, my friend Tom McGuinness in the
That's the name of your new band.
Yes, he calls me the Renaissance man. Whenever we're working together in the studio, he goes, "Look, Marcus, build this."
You can make things.
Yeah, my dad was an engineer, so I think I've inherited that. I mean, as a kid, I used to make models, FX models all the time. So I like that. I like making things, and I think if you're playing an instrument, that's a dexterous thing, isn't it? That you're touching wood or metal or something. There's definitely a tactile thing, and I think that tied in with my dad's engineering. My brother's an amazing car restorer and a drummer over in Australia.
Oh.
But yeah, I think I've definitely got that that left-right brain thing going on where I'm always fascinated how stuff works.
So let's cut to the chase and talk about Dumbles. Why Dumble? Why are you building amps? Why are you building Dumble copies?
Dumble. Robin Ford. Ramon and I bonded many years ago on Facebook over probably Robin Ford. That was probably the start of it. We realised that we've kind of...
I think it's Robin Ford and then Rakuda and
the whole thing, yeah. But I remember vividly when I was at Leeds, the first Yellow Jackets album came out, the one with the yellow cover.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And I just bought the very first Sony Walkman. Do you remember the yellow Walkmans?
Oh,
the orange headphones?
The ones you were supposed to be able to swim in, but don't try it at home.
Yeah, exactly. So I bought the first Walkman. I remember standing at the bus stop, and I'd got my vinyl, recorded this onto cassette, so I could listen to the Walkman. And I'd never heard Robin Ford before, and is Imperial Strut on there or one of those ones? I think it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I was just blown away by that song. Just the tone, the playing. And I've been obsessed with that ever since. That really just planted a seed, did that. And then I learned years later that he used a Dumble amp, and I also learned that Dumble amps were incredibly rare, and if they did ever come up, they were heinously expensive. So I thought the only chance I've ever got of getting one of these is if I learn how to build one. So that set me on a path of learning how to build amplifiers. So, But
I mean, you're effectively self-taught, as you say. You've got a certain natural dexterity and engineering inclination, but you haven't studied electronics.
I have no electronic skills at all. As I was saying to you guys earlier, I could solder. I'd always been able to solder cables and things like that, which I think is a skill probably every musician should have.
Really ought to.
Been able to fix a cable, and I'd made a couple of little pedals from kits with PCBs, and they worked eventually. And I thought, and a friend of mine who started building amps, Phil Hudson, great guitar player, I asked him to build me an amp, and he went, learn to build one yourself. He said, there's a forum on the internet. He said, there's amp building forums, all that. Just get online and start having a look around. So I joined up with a forum, the Amp Garage, big shoot out to the amp, get my chums on Amp Garage, and there basically a lot of people who are incredibly obsessed with building amps, and there's a separate forum about Dumble amps, and I probably spent a year just reading posts, looking at circuit diagrams, asking silly newbie questions that thankfully people answered, because generally I found on the internet people are very generous with their help and things. I mean, apart from people getting into silly arguments about politics and stuff on Facebook, in the right kind of forums, people are generous.
Can be useful.
So I literally just started from scratch, and I bought a kit from a guy in Cambridge called Amp Maker, single-ended 5-watt amp with really detailed instructions, as in put the green wire there, put the other end there, that level of, and then just looking at the circuit diagram and going, okay, that's what that does. Made it, of course, plugged it in, it didn't work. So it's like, well, why doesn't it work? Then you have to work out why.
Yeah.
Made it work. Got that working, moved up a step, made a JTM 45, which was like a big step up, and I thought, right, now I'm going to build my Robin Ford Dumble amp. So I then spent another 6 months just reading about this amp, looking at circuit diagrams, looking at layouts, reading anything everybody had said on the forum, and basically just went for it. And with the help of the guys on the forum, I got it working.
Right. And so then you've made quite a few Dumble amps with some quite named players using them.
Yeah, I think so going from nothing to the point whereby I'd made a few, and a good friend of ours, Alan Darby, who Alan and I have worked together many times with various different people. We worked with Rod Stewart together, we worked with the big star in Japan, Nikichi Yozawa, and I'd lost touch with him. I hadn't seen him for a while, and he came to one of my gigs and we got chatting. I said, I said, Alan, and I showed him a photograph, and he went, "It's a Dumble, you've got a Dumble." I said, "Well, no, it's not." I said, "I've made it." He went, "Well, you made it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I've got to hear that." So I took it round and he plugged it in and he went, "Man, that's the best sounding."
And I remember he phoned me that evening.
Did he?
And he said, you got to hear this. You got to hear this. He was really excited.
Well, so I knew that when Alan plugged in and he A/B'd it against his current rig, because Alan's very detailed about his sound and always has been.
Yeah.
And I thought, it must be good. I think it's good, but I'm biased to a certain degree.
Yeah.
It must be good. So I made some more, and then the sort of pinnacle of it really was, I was home one night, just about to put spaghetti on the plate, and a friend of mine said, "Marcus, it's, who was it? I can't remember, soundman friend of mine." He said, "I'm with Larry Carlton." He said he's just starting a UK tour and his amps have got stuck in customs.
I remember. And he'd play Ronnie Scott's the next night.
It was in Birmingham, and he said his amps, he said he's really not happy at the moment because they've been sending amps for him to try and he's just rejected every one. And he said, "And I've told him you've got some great amps. Can he call you?" I said, yeah, sure, whatever. Not thinking anything of it. Putting the spaghetti out, pick up the phone. "Hello? Hi, it's Larry." I was like, "Oh, hi Larry, how's it going?" "Not good." I said, "Oh, okay." Well, and he told me the story about his amps, and he said, "I hear you got some great amps." I said, "Yeah, do you want to borrow one?" And he went, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So his tour manager came over.
So do you know, have we talked about this before? So there were two people that they were calling to find an amp. Right, one was you.
Who was the other? You?
Yeah. Right, and then as a result, they asked me to go along the next night.
Oh, right.
Right, see him play, and there was an amp that I knew well, your amp.
Yes.
On the stage, and it was a wonderful gig. The only thing that was disappointing was that he was playing this wonderful borrowed amp, and he was playing a pretty generic red cherry dot neck reissue Gibson 335, and you could hear with Carlton playing it and the amp sounding the way I knew it did, the guitar was letting the whole thing down.
Yeah,
but it was a wonderful gig.
It was, and Larry was very happy, and he gave me. He was very complimentary about my.
Have you got some photos?
I have, yes.
We'll put the photos up, guys.
Yeah.
You can see
what was great is when I went backstage, the first people to see me were his band, who thanked me.
Yeah.
His band thanked me.
Yeah.
because it had made
It made their
Larry,
life.
it made Larry happy.
Fantastic.
So for me to walk it in and see my amp sat there with one of my heroes playing.
But listen, I think we need a quick disclaimer here, okay? Because the internet being the place it is, okay? I think we need to be very clear that nobody is talking about passing anything off as Dumble amps.
No.
Okay, these are published circuits.
Yes.
That somebody is building, mainly for their and their immediate circle's enjoyment, and that's all that's going on here. We need to be careful about that because, rightly so, there's a whole intellectual property issue going on, and there are some people out there who are passing counterfeit stuff off, whether it's guitars or amplifiers, for high tickets these days. So we need to be careful.
Absolutely, yes. And I built that amp for myself. And
I first heard your amp when I came over to Bob's. I think we were doing something together, and Bob said, "I've got a tape here of Alan Darby, or some recording of Alan Darby." And I didn't even really know. I heard the name Alan Darby, but I didn't really know who he was. But I knew he was some big deal player. And I just heard this amazing guitar tone, and I was just thinking, "No, it's not going to be that good." And I was like, "What the hell?"
The one I played you, it
was really something. It was really something special, and I thought, "No, that's a D tone.
Yeah,
that is the D tone."
And also, I mean, you've made quite a name for yourself with your Mystic Blues out of nailing a tone that's very close. You know, we're all on the same quest.
But it was up there. It was up there, guys. As you know, so kudos to you, man.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you nailed it. But also, while we're here,
and kudos to Alan Darby because he's a great player.
Indeed, and my good friend.
So a normal Tweed Deluxe, the two separate. They normally have 4 inputs: a high and a low. Bright normally, this has just got 3 for whatever reason. It's the earlier model. But when you alternate the two volumes tend to interact. The two channels interact with each other, even if you're only plugged into one. This is split, so I use the fact that the two channels are split to voice the channels differently. So this channel is just a sort of classic. It's almost like a sort of blackface sort of channel. Clean thing, and then your standard bright channel, which is this volume you'll hear is I'll put it on the same level. It's a bit gainier, and it's got that classic sort of tweedy start to break up on the bright and classic Tweed. And then I decided to add a cascade switch, so that basically puts one channel into the next. So this now acts like a master, and that can add a bit of gain, wind up that, so we're now into proper So it's become incredibly versatile.
So am I allowed to say this is a kind of a clone of the Tweedledee Dumble circuit?
It started off as a, yes. I mean, to be honest, Dumble only changed a few values. The main thing he changed was to tighten it up, a bit more filtering, higher voltage on the rectifier, but mainly to tighten up the bottom end. And then I've taken Tweed Deluxe, Tweedledee Deluxe, which is the Dumble, and then I've added my thing on this by the cascading, and the voicing of this channel is different. The actual voicing of this channel I took from the Dumble Bluesmaster values.
Oh, okay.
And then I put on this little switch at the back, which is like a adjustable negative feedback, so it will, you know, it will sound like I say, like a Quite civilised at that.
Should we move to the next amp?
Why not?
Okay, what is this? Well, aesthetically, I've always liked the look of the Comet amps. The first one of which I ever saw was, again, going back to Mark Knopfler. Ken Fisher made Mark what's basically a Ken Fisher started Trainwreck amplifiers, and Ken died sadly at quite a young age. But one of the last amps he ever made was a red Comet amp for Mark Knopfler. So I remember seeing this design and really liking it. So this is a kind of Ken Fisher Trainwreck rocket stroke Z-Rec. Brad Paisley is a big fan of the rocket, and I think Dr. Z used to work for Ken Fisher. I have a feeling they had a connection. So, and it's basically an AC30 on steroids, as Ramon pointed out, looking at the back of the valves. AC30s do run hot. But Ken took the best bits of a top boost AC30 and produced this amp. So it has the chime of an AC30. Also, you know, it will. Beautifully on, you know, on the volume.
And that amp's got a kind of power scale on it too.
Yes. So if so if you want to be flat out, this will knock that's. It's not. It knocks the power. It's like Eddie Van Halen used to use a variac to knock down his amps. So it's kind of like a master volume, but it's doing it with the voltages, so you can still get. Sounds okay.
Crack tone, respectful volume.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a VVR as it's known. So it's like a master volume, but it does it with voltage. So it does change the sound a bit, but it's still useful. It'd be good for you. This, actually, it's the only amp I think that's got my my studio name on there.
Indeed.
Looks alright, doesn't it? What is this? This is the closest thing is, I suppose, is one of the original Bad Cats, which I think came out of Matchless, if I'm not mistaken. I was just looking for something that might possibly be slightly different, having got such a big collection. So it's 50 watt, 2AL 34s, cathode biased, so they run very hot, a bit like the rocket bin cathode bias running really hot. And what's it got? It's got switchable solid state or tube rectification, which is a subtle thing, but yeah, it's kind of nice. Twin channel. It's got that classic sort of matchless, almost like not the same as the Vox, but that's similar. They have got a very sparkly top end. So we're on the clean channel. So yeah, it can be very bright. So yeah, twangy little amp. And then a separate gain channel which has got all the EQ on, so this is, yeah, it can be pretty gainy. I think the guy from, who was the guitar player with I can't remember his bloody name, Bon Jovi,
Sambora.
was it Sambora? I think one of it might have been, I'm not sure, I could be wrong about that completely, but yeah, this is the gain channel. So yeah.
Okay, so that was solid state rectifier you selected there.
Yes, I think slightly a bit more gain. I think there's a bit more voltage goes through, so I think it gives you a bit more. It's quite a spiky amp, isn't it?
So yeah, what was your aim? What was your kind of brief when you were building this amp? What was the plan?
The main thing was it was a different topography. So I've got I've got a Princeton classic Fender amps. I've got the Dumble whole thing. The Trainwreck does the Vox thing. I've got a couple of I've got a Marshall JSM45. I've got this that covers like the Tweed, and I thought something different. And you don't know what they're going to sound like until you build them. So I thought, looking at the schematic, I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's different. The way it gain stages, the fact that the clean channel goes straight out to the phase inverter with no tone. I thought that's going to be interesting, and I think the clean, it's a very direct clean tone on there. There's no, from the point you go in to going out of the speakers, there's not a lot of actual circuit stuff, capacitors and things in the way. So yeah, and then just the overdrive channel, I thought, well, it'll be interesting to see what it's like, and they've all got their thing and they all suit different guitars. And I think as I do a lot of studio work, and I quite often have the luxury to try and find the best sound for a particular part. This will be great for something. In fact, the first thing I used it on when I built it was I'm working on a Croydon Composers track, and I used it for the sort of crunch rhythm parts and clean parts on the track, and it sounded great recorded. So it's different enough that it'll stay around. I don't know if it would be my number one. If I was to pick one amp, I don't think I would pick that as just for me personally. It's not. I don't think it maybe gels with my style as much. but it's certainly a useful amp.
So it could be for sale.
Everything's for sale, and do you know what? It works. It works really nicely. Can I just give a quick shout out to Thomas Gray, who built my lovely Gray Guitars Telecaster. Yeah.
Can I just see the back of the neck of this? This is a beautiful neck, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Look at this neck, guys.
Yeah, there you go. And I think actually it does. I think it does. The crunch on this with both pickups. I think that they. It's a nice. It suits this well. Sort of slight, not
bitey.
It's bitey, but.
Nashville sort of sound, isn't it?
Yeah.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that little denouement of some of Marcus's amps. As you can hear, they all sound fantastic in their own ways. Just for the geeks amongst you, they were all being played through a Celestian Gold in an open back cab, so you were hearing the same speaker all the time. But I, for one, I mean, I've really enjoyed meeting these amps, which I'd never met before, as well as the other amps of Marcus's that I've heard before. So that's it from us for this week. We're just going to play you out with a little number. Marcus, thank you so much,
Bob,
for joining us, man. It's been a joy.
Ramon.
You're the man, thank you.
It's been beautiful.
It's been great. What a great day.